One takeoff, one warning, one fatal decision. The snow wasn't the problem, not by itself at least. Flights operate in winter every single day. Crews are trained extensively for it. Aircraft are certified and tested for it. What made this flight completely different was a quiet decision made inside the cockpit, long before the engines ever reached their full power. This story begins with a delay, a common frustrating part of air travel. But this delay was different. Ice was forming on the wings, faster than anyone wanted to admit. With every passing minute, the schedule slipped further behind, and the pressure started to build. It's a kind of pressure you can't see on any instrument, but it's as real as the altimeter. It's the pressure of schedules, passenger connections, and the simple desire to get the job done and get home. Inside the cockpit, everything looked acceptable. Not perfect, but acceptable. And that's a dangerous word in aviation. That's where trouble so often begins. The aircraft had been de-iced, but the snow was still falling. A fine, wet snow that clung to surfaces. As the plane pushed back and began to taxi towards the runway, one of the pilots noticed something off. It was subtle. The engine readings, specifically the engine pressure ratio, were lower than what the performance charts called for. Not dangerously low, not in the red. Just low enough to raise a question. Low enough to be an anomaly. He said something. He voiced his concern. The response from the other pilot, the captain, came back quickly. It was calm, confident. The captain explained that cold weather often affects the readings. It was nothing unusual, he assured him. So they kept moving. The taxi to the runway continued. Snow kept falling, ice kept forming. And those numbers on the engine display stayed slightly wrong. This is the most dangerous kind of warning. The kind that doesn't scream at you with a loud alarm or a flashing red light. It's the kind that whispers. It's a quiet doubt, a small inconsistency that's easy to rationalize away. It's a gut feeling that something isn't quite right. The first officer, still uneasy, mentioned it again. This time, the captain's answer was firmer. He was more assertive. Everything was within the acceptable limits for takeoff, he stated. The checklists were done. They were clear for departure. And with that, the moment to stop, to take a breath, to investigate the anomaly, that moment quietly slipped away. The invisible pressure to keep moving had won. The runway came into view, a long white ribbon stretching into the snowy landscape. The pilots lined up the aircraft on the center line. They received their final clearance from the tower. The captain advanced the thrust levers. The engines spooled up, their roar cutting through the quiet of the cockpit. Acceleration began, and almost immediately, something felt different. It was a sluggishness, a feeling that the aircraft was moving through thick mud. Speed was building, but not fast enough. The numbers on the airspeed indicator were climbing too slowly. The critical decision speed V1 was called out. This is the point of no return. After V1, a takeoff must continue. Then came the call for rotation. The pilot pulled back on the controls. The nose of the aircraft lifted, but it felt heavy, unresponsive. The aircraft finally broke ground, barely. It staggered into the air, struggling for altitude. What the pilots couldn't see was the thin, almost invisible layer of ice that had reformed on the wings. It wasn't thick, but it was enough. Enough to disrupt the smooth flow of air. Enough to destroy a critical percentage of the lift the wings were supposed to generate. The margins for a safe takeoff had vanished. The climb stopped almost as soon as it started. The aircraft hung in the air, mushy and unstable. The angle of attack increased as the pilot tried to force the plane to climb. But with the contaminated wings, this only brought them closer to a stall. Inside the cockpit, there was no time left for discussion. No time for a checklist. No time for a correction. There was only the sudden, terrifying sound of the stall warning, a stick shaker vibrating the control column, followed by a blaring horn. The aircraft had lost too much airspeed. Then it lost control. The left wing dropped violently, and the plane rolled over. Impact came seconds later. What followed was confusion, freezing conditions, and a deafening silence. The kind of silence that only arrives after everything has already gone wrong. When investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrived on the scene and later reconstructed the flight, they didn't find a single catastrophic mechanical failure. The engines had worked. The control systems had responded to inputs. The aircraft itself was sound. What had failed was a chain of small human decisions. They found a shortcut taken instead of following a procedure to the letter. They found a hesitation to challenge authority when something felt wrong. They discovered a clear warning to incorrect engine readings that was acknowledged but not acted upon. The incorrect readings were caused by the pilot's failure to turn on the engine anti-ice system, which in turn allowed ice to build up on the engine sensors, giving false, lower than actual thrust readings. But critically, that ice also built up on the wings. One pilot sensed something wasn't right. The other, the one in command, believed everything was fine. And in aviation, belief is not enough. You must know. You must verify. Modern flight decks and the entire culture of crew resource management are built around one central lesson learned from tragedies like this one. Authority does not equal correctness. The captain is in charge, but the captain can be wrong. The first officer's job isn't just to fly the plane. It's to be a safety net, to question, to challenge, and to speak up until the issue is resolved. Any voice in the cockpit matters. Any doubt matters. Because when you look back at aviation history, you see the same heartbreaking pattern again and again. Disasters don't usually start with a sudden explosion. They start with silence. They start with a number on a gauge that just feels a little bit off. They start with a thought that never becomes a command to stop. And once an aircraft leaves the ground, those seconds of hesitation, those moments of unvoiced concern can never be recovered. Every single checklist you see pilots perform today, every cross-check between the two pilots, every rule and regulation that might seem excessive or redundant to an outsider, it exists for a reason. It exists because somewhere in the past, a crew decided to continue when they should have stopped. And the aircraft and everyone on board never came back. This incident, Air Florida Flight 90, which crashed into the 14th Street Bridge in Washington, D.C. in 1982, became a landmark case study. It fundamentally changed how pilots are trained. It emphasized the dangers of get-home-itis and the critical importance of assertiveness from every member of the flight crew. The lesson is simple, but profound. If something feels wrong, it is wrong until it is proven right. If you want to hear more real aviation stories like this, focus not just on the machines, but on the human decisions that shape their fate. Stick around. Because the most dangerous moments in flight often happen quietly, on the ground, before anyone even realizes they are in danger. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more.